Hey, everybody. Glad to be with you here tonight. We're having yet another great late night chat. Let's go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night chat, late night conversation. We're going to follow our normal format. The way we generally do things is I give opening remarks. And then those opening remarks are followed by a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then after that, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. And there are three ways to send questions. The first way is a Rumble rant. The second one is Cash App, Caleb Moppin 22. And the third one is Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me the Coffee is the best way. Buy Me a Coffee / Caleb Moppin. Great way to send your questions. It's tremendous. It's absolutely awesome if you do it that way. But you don't have to. There are other ways of doing such things. There are other ways to do it. But there are different ways of supporting me and asking questions. And Buy Me a Coffee is the one that I prefer. So, as far as announcements, October 4th, we are having a National Day of Action. And that National Day of Action on October 4th is a day that we are calling for the peace talks with Russia to continue. January 11th, we're having a CPI reception in New Jersey to kick off the new year and announce plans for next year's convention. Details on that, registration, all of that is to be announced soon. We're not there yet. Join the Center for Political Innovation. We always need more members. We are doing a lot of exciting stuff and all of that. If you're curious, if you'd like the backstory of where CPI came from and all of that, we did just publish a really neat article on the history of our organization. We've been around for, 4 years now at this point. We have a great origin story. You can read all about us. We've been through a lot of different leaps and evolutions as we figure out how to build an anti-imperialist movement in America. So you can read all about who we are, and we'd love for you to join the Center for Political Innovation. So the live stream tonight follows our usual format. First, I give my opening remarks. Then from there, I answer people's questions for the remainder of the night. We do a roll call before I start doing the questions. Questions can be sent Rumble Rants, Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App, but the best way is Buy Me a Coffee. That's really, really great. So Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send your questions if you've got them. And so I'm going to talk about recent events. I'm going to talk about events that are taking place. One thing I did just want to mention before we get into the main topic for tonight, which is the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey, is that Assata Shakur died in Cuba. And we want to talk about that, not in the way that leftists are across social media right now, because we want to be careful with all of this, right? These are nuanced situations, right? Assata Shakur was a civil rights activist. I believe she was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She eventually joined the Black Panther Party, and then she joined the Black Liberation Army. And the Black Liberation Army was very much a left adventurist organization. It did a lot of illegal things that I wouldn't approve of, and I don't think it was the right thing for them to do. That said, we have always, at the Center for Political Innovation, called for a blanket amnesty for all members of the Black Liberation Army, all members of the Weather Underground, all members of various groups from that time period. We're talking the early 70s. The reason being that there was all kinds of illegal activity by the federal government during those years. Fred Hampton was brutally killed because he was running a free breakfast program, gunned down in his bed as he was sleeping. Martin Luther King Jr. was, widely targeted by the COINTELPRO program, and many Black activists came to the conclusion that it was necessary to engage in, armed violence. We don't condone that kind of activity. And now many people, and I haven't really studied the details of the case, but I think there's a strong case that could be made that Assata Shakur was innocent of the crime for which she was convicted and then fled from the United States. That said, though, the Black Liberation Army did engage in a lot of armed activities. And again, we don't condone that kind of activity. We don't think that kind of thing should be encouraged, and we don't think it was the right thing to do even back then. You may say, well, Caleb, it wasn't for you to decide. You're right, it wasn't. I wasn't even born yet, and I'm not Black. But it's important, right, in this atmosphere where the ruling class is trying to foment another years of lead, where people all over social media are celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk, etc., celebrating the murders, the alleged crimes of Luigi Mangione, that we make clear we recognize that Assata Shakur was a heroic Black freedom fighter. But we also recognize that while she was, I guess many people believe, innocent of the crime for which she was convicted, the organization that she was part of did things that we don't necessarily condone. And that doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter because she and all of the former Black Liberation Army members should have received a blanket amnesty and pardon. Because if we're really going to heal the country, no FBI agents went to jail for what they did during COINTELPRO, for killing Fred Hampton, for smearing the Black Panthers. COINTELPRO, you read the details of the FBI program in the 60s and 70s. It was vicious. It was evil. Many people were killed. Many people were locked up on false charges. Geronimo Pratt was, in prison for decades when the FBI had proof that he did not commit the murders he was charged with, and they finally let him go. There were all kinds of Black radicals and activists that were framed up, that were murdered, that were killed. The FBI incited the United Slaves organization of Ron Karenga against the Black Panthers. The two groups had a shootout, and a couple members were killed. I mean, that blood is on the FBI's hands. They were sending poison pen letters and inciting the groups against each other. There's all kinds of examples of people in the Black liberation movement that were wrongfully murdered and killed. And in that context, many members of the Black liberation movement took up arms, and they felt it was necessary to engage in violent self-defense. Self-defense is very, very American. That said, we don't condone illegal activities, but in the context that it took place to heal the country, there should be a blanket amnesty. And that's what they did in South Africa, for example, right? When apartheid was overturned, there were many Black activists who'd been involved with the Pan-African Congress or the Spear of the Nation or the African National Congress who had bombed buildings or shot people, but they were up against the apartheid system that was also very brutal and murderous. And so when apartheid was overturned, they passed a blanket amnesty for all of those African National Congress people. As a way of healing the nation. What sense would it make if you admit that the apartheid system was brutal? If people were brutal in response to it and you just keep them locked up for the rest of their lives, that doesn't make sense. And in Northern Ireland, when the Good Friday Agreement was signed, they let all the IRA political prisoners go and they released them as a way of trying to heal the pain of the conflict. And so we have always been for freeing Mumia Abu-Jamal, freeing all the Black Liberation Army activists, not because we glorify what they did, and especially not because we would want to promote illegal violent activity, but rather because they were responding to a state and a government that was very, very, very brutal and very, very illegal, violating its own laws in targeting the Black community and targeting Black activists who did organize peacefully. And based on that situation, it doesn't make sense to keep them in jail, that there should be a blanket amnesty. And we want to be very, very clear about this, right? I see a lot of people across social media that are just saying, Assata, presente, Assata hero. And they're not wrong that she was very heroic in a lot of ways. No question about it. And, but we also need to make clear that we are not advocating violence, because right now the right wing, the Republicans, the MAGA people, are stoked up about left-wing terrorism. And the narrative of the right wing, as they refer to Assata Shakur as being a, quote, cop killer. Many people believe she did not do the crime that she was convicted of, that she eventually broke out of prison for committing. And like I said, I haven't studied the details of the case. I think it's very likely that she was innocent of the crime. But even if she wasn't, there should be a blanket amnesty, because so many Black freedom fighters were killed and gunned down, etc. So many Black freedom fighters had their rights violated, etc. And she fled to Cuba. And I was interviewed on WBAI radio this afternoon. And they asked me about Assata Shakur. And I said, Assata Shakur is a great example of how the Black freedom movement in America was tied up with the anti-colonial, anti-imperialist movement around the world, right? Where did Assata Shakur flee to? Where did she flee to? She fled to Cuba. And she wasn't the only Black revolutionary who fled to Cuba. Robert F. Williams of Monroe, North Carolina, he fled to Cuba. He also fled to China. North Korea welcomed Eldridge Cleaver when he was on the run from the American government. And I believe Eldridge Cleaver's daughter was born in North Korea, right? You can read about that. And I believe Eldridge Cleaver even published a collection of the writings of Kim Il-sung on the Juche ideology. He published his own edition of the North Korean, Marxist ideology, Juche. And, Mao Zedong was a big supporter of the Black freedom movement and wrote official statements about the civil rights movement in America. That was pretty amazing in a lot of ways. So, we want to make clear that Assata Shakur was heroic in many, many ways. And it's tragic that she had to spend the rest of her life in Cuba and hiding. But the fact that Cuba is where she went, that indicates how much the Black freedom movement in America is tied in with the struggle against imperialism and the struggle against the rule of the world by the big monopolies. And the Soviet Union was a big supporter of the Black freedom movement in America. And China was as well. And so was North Korea, and so was Cuba, right? So was Gaddafi in Libya. Gaddafi gave millions of dollars to the Black Panther Party in the United States, as well as other Black activists like the Nation of Islam. Gaddafi also funded the IRA, etc. And that is the really important lesson to deduce from this, right? And that one thing that absolutely infuriates me is that, and this was kind of how this channel got to be big, is that you have these woke people nowadays who say that they love Assata Shakur. They say they love Assata Shakur. They say they love the Black Panthers, but they say anyone who admires North Korea is a Nazbol, is a Nazi. Well, the Black Panthers admired North Korea. They had a particularly close relationship with North Korea. In addition to the other socialist countries, North Korea and the Black Panthers were particularly close. The Black Panthers required people to read Mao and his Little Red Book. And that the idea, and that was, I debated Vosh, he was putting out there this idea that if you admire the Soviet Union, if you admire North Korea, if you admire China or Cuba, you're just the same as a Nazi. And I pointed out to him on the channel, I said that you're saying that the Black Panthers and Eldridge Cleaver and also Albert Einstein and also Langston Hughes and all these great people, you're saying that they're just the same as Nazis. And he responded by saying, well, that's just an appeal to authority. No, it's not an appeal to authority. You said A plus B equals C. You said if somebody admires the Black Panthers, or if there's an activist in the United States, A, and they admire these governments, then C, they're the same as the Nazis. And I said, aha, so I can think of activists in the United States who admired these governments, and then according to you, that means they're the same as Nazis. And that is not a legit, I mean, you can't claim Helen Keller was the same as the Nazis. You cannot claim that Albert Einstein and Aaron Copland and Lillian Hellman and you can't claim they were the same as the Nazis. You cannot claim that, that W.E.B. Du Bois and Langston Hughes were the same as the Nazis. You can't do that, right? I mean, you just can't do that. That's not a defensible position to take. You can disagree with them. You can say that you feel that they shouldn't have defended the Soviet Union, but you can't equate them with Nazis. You just can't do that. That's just not a defensible position. And that is why the BreadTube crowd went after me. And I was blown away by how ignorant the BreadTube crowd were. They didn't even bother to Google this, but I brought up Angela Davis, for example. I said, Angela Davis defended North Korea, defended the Soviet Union. All these people replied to me, again, with this smug arrogance. Oh my God, everybody knows Angela Davis is an anarchist. She would never defend those regimes. Well, I'm sorry, my friend. Angela Davis, from 1972 until she quit the Communist Party in 1991, she was the official American, she was like the second in command of the Communist Party USA, and she was on Soviet television all the time, and she toured East Germany, and she defended those governments up and down. And that is a fact. And just because that doesn't fit your warped new left worldview, it is reality. And I mean, you're not going to equate Angela Davis with the Nazis. So how can you equate me with the Nazis for just because I take a position that she takes? Right. And that, and it's funny, these kinds of arguments, that was the beginning of the cancel campaign against me by BreadTube, interestingly enough. Right. It was having those kinds of arguments. And I won those arguments over and over and over. I won those arguments, but it doesn't matter because the internet is rigged. The internet is rigged, and you can win the argument, but then they can just keep canceling you, just keep coming out with this. You're friends with a transphobe. You're a friend, and it was just thing after thing. And you met Dugan, and that was one thing that Gavin pointed out on his stream, or on his talk that he gave in Chicago at our conference. He said the reason to hate Caleb is always changing. There's always a new reason you're supposed to hate me. There's always a new reason, right? If today, first I was a Nazi because I admired all these anti-imperialist governments. Then I was a Nazi because I met with Alexander Dugin. Then I was a Nazi because I was friends with Jyoti Brar, the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, who is trans critical and critical of the trans thing. Then I was a Nazi because blah, 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 blah. And they're always coming up with a new reason because I am a legit anti-imperialist, right? I am the real deal. And so, I think about Assata Shakur and how, I don't necessarily approve of the tactics that her organization embraced. And we need to make that clear. In the past, I wouldn't have emphasized that the way I'm emphasizing this now, right? 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said it was as important to emphasize that. Now I'm really saying it is very important to emphasize that because we're in an atmosphere where the left is being psyched up to engage in senseless, ruthless political violence. And we don't want to play into that. We don't think that is helpful. And what's crazy is, back at the time of the Black Liberation Army, the political violence was against police officers, right? Whether you oppose it or not, which we do oppose it. It was not the right thing for them to do at that time, but in the circumstances, you can understand why they might have felt that way. But nowadays, the senseless political violence is against conservatives, you don't even have to be an official of the government, right? Just average people who disagree, right? Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck and we saw people jumping up and down and dancing around it. That's not healthy. And so then conservatives are now being mobilized to dox and try to get fired from their jobs, all kinds of people who made that mistake. Well, I don't think those people should be fired from their jobs for that. I think that, I would like them to change their minds, and some of them will. Some of them will as soon as it stops being cool, right? I think a lot of those people that were doing that only did it because that's what all their friends were doing, and they didn't think it through very well. But the ones that thought it through, I think circumstances could get them to change their perspective. I certainly have changed my perspective on a lot of things. There were times in my life where I said things that I look back on. I took positions that I don't take anymore. And I think that many of the people that are doing that will eventually change their positions. Most of them will change it as soon as it stops being trendy and cool. And the more serious ones will change with life circumstances, right? I mean, one thing that it's not a fun thing to admit, but it is just the reality, is that when it comes to politics, and this is something that's important to acknowledge, and we don't want to be elitist about this, right? We're not being elitist, but the reality is that when it comes to politics, most people don't deeply engage. They don't, right? Most people, if they vote for the Democrat Party, it's because they live in a Democrat city, they have Democrat parents, they have Democrat coworkers, and they live in a blue state, in a blue city, and they come from a blue family, so they vote blue. And most people that are Republicans in America, they live in a red state, they have red parents, they have red coworkers and friends, and they vote red. And they don't think about it that much. They might think about it around election time. They might think about it around maybe a cultural issue that affects them, right? Maybe if they know someone who's LGBT, they take that issue more personally. Maybe if they are deeply religious, or they are concerned about their kids, they're into the, conservative family values thing, or maybe if they're a gun owner, maybe certain issues that do affect them personally on a cultural level, they might have strong feelings about. For the most part, most people don't really think about politics that much. There is a very small minority of people that take politics very seriously, do lots of research and dig into politics, and take it seriously enough to really engage and understand. And those of us for whom that is the case should feel very proud, because we are the change makers. We are the vanguard. We're the people that are leading. We're ahead of the game. And we shouldn't think, oh, we're cursed. And we also shouldn't think we're better. We should think we have a great responsibility. We are motivated. We have the energy and the interest and the time and the desire to dig into this stuff in a way other people do not. And that is something that is great. I would argue that you could almost argue that it's almost like, we've been selected for that purpose by a higher power, right? A higher power, divine authority has said, I need somebody to do this, and they picked you to do it. And that is a great honor, but it's also a great responsibility. It means that you should take this seriously. It means you shouldn't just be retweeting things because other people are. You shouldn't be taking positions just because other people are, because you take this seriously. If other people vote blue because all the people in their office vote blue, that's fine. If other people vote red because all the other people in their office, in their town, in their neighborhood vote red, that's fine, but not for you. Not for you. You have a responsibility because you're one of the people who takes this seriously. It's your job to come to the conclusion about what is the best thing to do, to actually look at this. And people will listen to you. And they may not listen to you if you seem to be completely opposed to what they stand for. And they won't listen to you if you act like you hate them or you think you're superior to them. But if you really dig into this stuff and you know about this stuff, people will come to you and ask your opinion. And that's a great, important position to be in. You have the position to push other people forward. And that's something to be proud of. That's a responsibility that is important. And, if you're going to be that kind of person that does have the time and the interest and the desire to dig into all this stuff, you should do it. You should do it, and you should do it with pride and with responsibility. And that's the kind of attitude that the Center for Political Innovation is putting forward. And that's why I'm responding to the death of Assata Shakur responsibly, right? If I were to just go, Assata Shakur, woohoo, right, which is happening, and people have the right to do that. If I were to do that, in this atmosphere, everyone I talk to who's a conservative is going to put me in the same category as the people cheering the murder of Charlie Kirk. They're going to think Caleb's a cop killer. Caleb wants to murder people who disagree with him, and they're going to be triggered, and they're not going to listen to anything that I say. And if I were to just say Assata Shakur, woohoo, and woke people heard me, they would just think, oh, Caleb's just like us. He has no criticism of what we're offering. He's just one of us. Well, I am neither of those things. Number one, I don't advocate political violence. And I see how dangerous it is that people are celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk, that people are celebrating the crimes alleged of Luigi Mangione. And I'm worried, and I've written a whole book warning about the danger of political violence, the danger of an American Years of Lead. On the other hand, at the same time, I do recognize that the Black freedom movement that Assata Shakur dedicated her life to, that she was a dedicated organizer for, that she did organize peacefully, but eventually came to the conclusion she had no other choice than to be violent. That movement is a really, really important movement. And that it's not like she just woke up one day and said, oh, I'm going to be violent. No, there was a political context in which relentless violence was coming down on peaceful organizers like her. And in that context, they calculated that it was necessary to do what they did. I would maintain that they are wrong, but they didn't come to that conclusion in an atmosphere that, that was different, right? And that, the Black Liberation Army decided it was necessary to launch armed struggle because Black leaders were being murdered left and right. They were being slaughtered. They were being gunned down. And in that context, they said we need to launch an armed struggle. We need to defend ourselves by launching an armed struggle. And the context is very important. And they wouldn't have even considered it if there wasn't a huge amount of relentless, murderous violence from the American government that just continued in the most ruthless way with COINTELPRO, et cetera. And that's what you need to remember. And I'm making this point in a kind of a long roundabout way, but I just want to make this point because, I want to talk about these things responsibly. And, people get fired up and they say, oh, that's autistic, Caleb. Why can't you just applaud? Because I take this seriously, right? You're not supposed to take things seriously, right? It's not cool if you take things seriously, right? When I would argue with these breadtube people, I would prove them wrong in what they were saying. And there were many instances where they would just tweet back at me, I am watching a movie with my girlfriend. Ooh, I am having a good time. And I'm a normal person doing normal things, you weirdo. Well, that's not an argument against anything I've said, but it's just they're just attacking you for caring so much. And that a lot of these influencer people don't care. And that's what my friend Noah pointed out to me. A lot of them don't care. Well, I don't think you should be talking about these issues if you don't care. I really don't think you should be talking about Assata Shakur if you don't care. If you don't care about American history, you don't care about the Black freedom movement, you don't care about communism, I don't think you should be talking about it. I think you should look into these issues if you care. And if you care, you should try to say the right thing. But the internet is populated full of people who don't care, who are inflated on social media because they don't care, because they will just mimic and say things, and that nuance and serious positions often are not going to make you go viral because they're going to make people uncomfortable, because they're going to cause people to question things. They're not just going to give people validation in their emotions, right? They're not, right? And Chris, nobody canceled anyone or got fired. Are you serious? Think about that statement. I marched in the street for Trayvon Martin and all, but Chris, seriously think about what you just said there. Really? No one ever made a bad tweet about either of those people and got fired from their job from it, had their life destroyed, had their reputation ruined. Nobody, Chris. Nobody. Really? Do you really believe that? No barista, no college kid, no person ever got in trouble and suffered cancel culture for how they talked about either of those cases. Chris, do you really believe that? As much as I understand that you're outraged that people are equating one case with the other and all of that, don't pretend that cancel culture has not been weaponized against all kinds of people around those kind of cases. And to be honest, there were a lot of people who talked about those kind of cases in a really nasty, rude way. right? I mean, I believe. Well, anyway, we're not on here to talk about it. Tonight we're going to talk about James Comey. We're going to talk about James Comey tonight. The reason that James Comey this indictment is a really, really good sign. It's a really, really good sign. Let me repeat that. The indictment of James Comey is a really, really good sign. And if you don't understand that, I understand why you might not understand that, because it's not obvious. It is certainly not obvious at first why the indictment of James Comey is such a good sign. It's not obvious. James Comey was indicted yesterday evening by the U.S. Department of Justice. The federal grand jury stamped their approval on his indictment for obstruction of justice and lying in his testimony before Congress. Specifically, lying in his testimony in relation to the Hillary Clinton email investigation and the Russiagate investigation. That in both of those cases, he made untrue statements under oath to the U.S. Congress, and that he also obstructed justice. Now, you might say, well, Caleb, this is no big deal. This is silly. This is whatever. This is political infighting. The way mainstream media is spinning it is that this is Trump targeting his rivals. This is Trump, trying to become all powerful and going after anyone who disagrees with him. Here's what you need to understand. When Barack Obama was president, the United States violently overthrew the government of Ukraine and installed a fanatically anti-Russian government. And that government that the U.S. installed, the fanatically anti-Russian government installed by the United States in Ukraine, started tearing down the World War II memorials and outlawed the teaching of the Russian language, and the people in the Donbass region declared independence from that government. And in response to them declaring independence, the Ukrainian government started bombing them. And it killed thousands of people. All these children. This is a monument called the Alley of Angels to all the children killed in the Donbass by the bombs sent by the U.S.-backed regime in Kiev. And during the election of 2016, Donald Trump ran on a platform of trying to de-escalate that situation. An agreement had been signed, the Minsk agreement. And I actually spoke to Donald Trump during the election. I have spoken to Donald Trump once. I've been in the same room with him as a couple more other times, but I actually spoke to him once, and I will show you that video. I will show you the video of me speaking to Trump during the 2016 election. March of 2016, yours truly, Caleb Maupin, actually spoke to Donald Trump, and I will put that video on the screen. I actually dug it up recently. I will put that video on. Hold up. This is Caleb Maupin speaking to Donald Trump during the 2016 election. Hold on. Hold your horses. I will find the clip. Hold on.
That's very nice.
The monopoly.
I think
other countries protect their national interests in the same.
some people don't like it.
Hold on. This is me speaking.
I think
Speaking to Trump during the election.
Hoping for better relations with Russia as president.
Sure, I want a better relationship with everybody. A better with Russia, yeah. But I want a better relationship with everybody. Go ahead.
Position you maintain with the media and kind of anti-Russian overdrive?
No, I don't think so. I think the media understands. Look, if we can get along, Putin says very nice things about me. I think that's very nice. It has no effect on me other than I think it's very nice. If we get along with Russia, that's very good. If Russia wants to spend millions of dollars a day dropping bombs on ISIS, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Some people don't like it. They say, no, that's our job. What's not our job? It's let Russia, if they want to do that, I'm all for it. No, I want to get along with all countries.
All right, that was me. That was my one interaction with the U.S. President, Donald Trump. That was when I spoke to President Trump. And that was his position. He wanted to improve U.S. relations with Russia. And he ran for president on that platform. And during the election, all of a sudden, it started getting out into mainstream media. Russia might be interfering in the election to back Donald Trump. And now we know that during that election, Barack Hussein Obama went to the CIA and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, and said to them, is Russia trying to interfere in the election to help Trump win? And they did all kinds of research, and they said, no, Russia is not. And then the election happened, and Trump won, and Barack Obama went back to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, and said, did Russia help Trump win? And they did all kinds of research, and they came back, and they said, no. In fact, Russia thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. Russia held off some of the information they had about Hillary Clinton that could have hurt her campaign. They sat on it. No, definitely not. And then Barack Obama said, you know what? I don't like that answer. And even though twice the intelligence community came back and said Russia did not interfere in the U.S. elections to help Trump, they didn't hack the emails and give them to WikiLeaks. That didn't happen, right? All of this. That it was just a lie. Barack Obama and his team got together and they said, we're going to run with this. And mainstream media said Russia interfered in the elections to get Trump elected. And they ran with this story. It was a hoax. It was a complete hoax. And they knew it wasn't true. They knew that Russia had actually they knew Hillary Clinton was addicted to painkillers, and they didn't release that information because they didn't want to interfere in the election. They also knew that Hillary Clinton was psychologically unstable and was having like meltdowns and, psychotic episodes. And they didn't reveal that because they didn't want to interfere in the election. And no, if Russia had wanted to interfere in the election, they had all kinds of dirt on Hillary Clinton they could have released, and they chose not to do that. And Trump won. And so Barack Obama and the Hillary Clinton campaign and James Clapper and James Comey, FBI Director James Comey, and all kinds of people got together and they huddled up and they said, we're going to say that Russia somehow is responsible for Trump winning. And what was weird is not a single vote was changed. But if you read the headlines, you would think, right, they would say things like Russia hacked the elections. You would think somehow Russia rigged the vote, but they didn't. Even if you read what they said, it was like Russia, shared some memes, or Russia, boosted some tweets, or Russia did this, but none of that amounted to anything that substantially changed the election results. But they ran with this story, and mainstream media ran with this story nonstop. Russia is responsible for Trump winning. And they then launched an investigation to show that Trump had somehow colluded with Russia in the election. And they spent millions of dollars, and they appointed Robert Mueller as the special prosecutor. They claim that Trump had colluded with Russia. They couldn't say conspired with Russia because conspiracy theories are something we've all been inoculated against. They said he colluded. They had to dig up a new word because if they said Trump had conspired with Russia, no one would believe them. So they said he colluded with Russia. And they did all kinds of investigation, even though there is no such crime in the United States as collusion. They couldn't find any evidence. There was no evidence, none whatsoever, no evidence at all that Trump had in any way cooperated with Russia, that Russia had helped Trump in any way. But Trump came into office with this narrative. They're constantly accusing him of being soft on Russia, constantly accusing him of being a Russian sympathizer, constantly accusing him of being in Putin's pocket, all this awful stuff. That's what they were constantly accusing him of. constantly accusing him of that. And as a result, Trump came into office and he couldn't improve relations with Russia like he'd wanted to. He was on the defensive. He was on the defensive. And he ended up sending lethal aid to Ukraine, which Obama never went that far. He sent lethal weapons to Ukraine. But it didn't stop there. After 4 years of telling us Trump and Russia were close, which wasn't true, the 2020 elections were approaching. And Hunter Biden's laptop, which he took to a repair shop, was full of all kinds of evidence of criminal activities, like him smoking crack with prostitutes, like him doing shady business deals with companies in Ukraine and gas companies in Ukraine and all kinds of stuff. It was the laptop from hell, they called it. Loads and loads of criminal activity was found in Hunter Biden's laptop. And the laptop store owner guys came forward with the evidence. And they said, look, Hunter Biden came and got his laptop repaired at our shop, and we found a whole bunch of criminal, illegal shit in his laptop. And mainstream media thought this might be a bit of an important story as Biden was running in the election against Trump. And so the FBI went to Twitter and they said, block this story. And the FBI went to Facebook and said, block this story. It's Russian propaganda. And Facebook and Twitter cooperated because they believed the FBI. And then all these intelligence professionals signed a document, all of them signed a document saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story is propaganda. And then after the election, the New York Times said, you know what? That Hunter Biden laptop story was 100% true. It was actually true. It was completely true. And no, it wasn't Russian propaganda. It was true. But Biden won the election. In fact, polls have gone on showing that if the American people had known about the Hunter Biden laptop scandal and known that it was true, they would have voted against Biden. They would have voted for Trump. Trump would have been reelected for another term. But Russiagate, this narrative of Russian propaganda to help Trump, Russia, that narrative paved the way for Biden to win the 2020 election with the FBI doing it. And we all know what happened when Biden got in. Biden certainly didn't improve things with Russia, and the special military operation moved in. Russia felt they had no choice to move in and protect the Donbass people. And now there's a war going on. There's a war going on in Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. And they would not have died if it wasn't for the Russiagate hoax. This is what you need to understand. There are hundreds of thousands of people that if Obama and James Comey and James Clapper and John Bolton and all these people hadn't huddled up and decided, you know what, we're going to say Trump was in bed with Putin. If they hadn't gotten together and lied and said something that the two different intelligence reports told them was not true for very, very good reasons. If they hadn't done that, hundreds of thousands of people that are now dead would be alive. Now, if that doesn't bother you, you have no moral compass, right? I can understand people saying, look, maybe somebody got confused or maybe they lied a little bit here or there. But if someone lies and it kills hundreds of thousands of people, that's a big deal, isn't it? Isn't it a big deal if you tell a lie and you tell it over and over and over again for 4 years straight, and then for another 4 years, and then a war starts because of that lie, and hundreds of thousands of people die? Is that not a big deal? I think that's a big deal, right? That's not cheating on your taxes, right? That's not saying you're busy that weekend because you don't want to help grandma move, right? That's not, that's not shoplifting a candy bar. This is some serious crime we're dealing with. This is a crime that has a very, very real human cost. James Comey, the FBI director, the former FBI director, is now the first person to be indicted for that crime, for lying to Congress about the Russia investigation. And I applaud that. I give thunderous applause to Pam Bondi, and I give thunderous applause to the Department of Justice and to Kash Patel. Thank you for indicting James Comey. And please, please indict John Bolton next. John Bolton undermined Trump when he was trying to make peace with North Korea. I absolutely think John Bolton, it looks like he was selling American secrets to the NATO countries and cooperating with them against Trump, and he undermined the North Korea peace accords. Please indict him next. And indict James Clapper, indict Barack Obama, indict John Brennan, indict them all. Now, my religious beliefs, I will say this, and this is actually a thing that most Christians forget, but the Bible makes very clear you're not to want vengeance upon another person, right? And you're not to sit in judgment of another person. That's one thing. You know, the Jehovah's Witnesses and some religious denominations will not serve on juries because the Bible says, do not judge, lest ye be judged, right? And that you're especially never supposed to wish ill will on someone else, as hard as that is, as much as your instincts. And so, as somebody who has seen how much the prison system hurts people and destroys people's lives, I would not feel right wishing that John Bolton go to prison, wishing that that James Comey go to prison, wishing that James Clapper or John Brennan go to prison, right? I wouldn't feel right in my soul wishing them the suffering of doing a prison term. So I'm not doing that. But I am free to be happy that they are indicted, because I think it should be a criminal offense to lie for years straight and get us into a war. I think that should be a criminal offense. And the only reason that war in Ukraine is going on is because of Russiagate. If it wasn't for Russiagate, that war wouldn't be happening, right? So I'm not wishing them to go to prison. I'm not wishing them for them to get the death penalty. I'm not wishing for them to be hung, drawn, and quartered and, have, rotten fruit thrown at them on the way to the gallows. None of that. I'm not wishing vengeance upon them. But I am happy that the Department of Justice and the Trump administration is moving ahead against the scoundrels who did this and pushing back and creating space where they don't dominate the narrative, fighting back against them. I think that's a great thing. They wouldn't have gotten away with what they did if mainstream media wasn't on their side, if so much of the apparatus, the colleges and the universities weren't on their side. They would not have gotten away with this if they didn't have a huge deep state apparatus on their side. And Trump is using the power of the federal government to push back against that apparatus. And you know what? And people say, well, Caleb, he's just doing it for his own reasons. Okay. That's fine. I don't care. I mean, they did it for their reasons. He's doing it for his reasons. This is something that I wrote about. Bonapartism, right? This is my book. It's now available in Chinese, by the way. The Chinese edition of this book is available. It's for sale in Chinese. Very exciting. But in this book, in chapter 2, I talk about Bonapartism. When capitalism enters a crisis, the ruling class begin fighting with each other. And as they begin fighting with each other, they begin using the power of the state to suppress rival wings of their own class. That is what we are seeing. There is a division within the American ruling class, and the Trump wing that, for its own reasons, wants a better relationship with Russia, maybe, right? At least talks like they want a better relationship with Russia sometimes. That wing is at odds with the rest of the ruling class and at odds with the imperialist intelligence agencies specifically, right? And so because of that, they're fighting back, and they're using the power of the Department of Justice to strike blows and weaken the wing of the ruling class that is getting in their way. Good for them. Great. I applaud them in doing so. I applaud them. I think it's a great, great thing that James Comey is indicted. I think it's a tremendous thing. I think it's great that Kash Patel, an outspoken critic of the FBI, is now the FBI director. I think it's great that Pam Bondi, who is a longtime advocate of civil liberties, who, basically wrote a memo, opposing the Foreign Agents Registration Act and saying it would only be used against foreign nationals for actual espionage. I think it's great that she's running the Department of Justice. And there's all kinds of stuff going on in the federal government that I don't like. I don't like the ICE raids. I don't like, going after pro-Palestine people for their speech. I don't like a lot of what Trump is doing. But indicting FBI Director James Comey, I approve. I approve. I approve. And, I think it's great. And I hope it's just the beginning of the Russiagate prosecutions. And I hope that the Tulsi Gabbard wing of the Trump administration gets stronger. Look, folks, if you think the Trump administration is all one, you are wrong. There are different forces within the Trump administration. There are different factions that want different things. There are ultra-Zionists within the Trump administration. There are people in the Trump administration that are Israel critical, right? There are authoritarian elements. There are libertarian elements. There are different factions within the Trump administration. The best faction in the Trump administration is Tulsi Gabbard. And Tulsi, look, I don't agree with her about Israel. I don't agree with her about a lot of the Islamophobic stuff she said over the years, but she represents a faction of the Pentagon. She comes out of the Pentagon that doesn't want World War III. And she actually asked Donald Trump to give her the job that would allow her to prevent World War III. And it looks like she's fighting an uphill battle within the administration, not even talking about the people outside the administration, but within the administration itself. It's an uphill battle to get what she wants done, right? It's been a year since Trump was reelected. Well, we've got a couple months. But it's almost a year since Trump was reelected, and not many good things have happened. And, I just have to be honest. I'm not looking to make an enemy out of Trump, and I'm not looking to diss Trump supporters. I don't think Trump is a fascist, but has Trump been a good president so far in this second term? Not really. Not really. I mean, we're back in Israel. It was an embarrassing moment to be an American today, I must say. It was a moment that our country should hold its head in shame. Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, mass murderer. He got up to speak at the United Nations, and the whole room walked out, except for America. And, that's a moment where I wish that was all over American TV. It's not. But the world, I wish Americans knew about that. We should just look ourselves in the mirror. Why is the whole world getting up and walking out on Benjamin Netanyahu because his bombing and murder of the Palestinians is so ugly and atrocious? And we're the one country that protects them at the Security Council, that writes them checks for their bombs and their weapons, that sends our FBI to go persecute college students who protest against them, that deports people for disagreeing with them. Why in the world are we as Americans carrying water for a racist ethno-state that says that non-Jews are inferior? Right? It says that, we, the chosen people, we have the right to murder anyone we want. We have the right to bomb and kill. We have the right to torture in our Constitution. Why are we carrying water for this ugly regime? Right? Now, and what's crazy is a lot of countries in the world recognize Israel diplomatically. They do business with Israel. Now, Muslim countries don't. But there's a lot of countries in Africa, a lot of countries in Latin America that do have a relationship with Israel. But they also walked out of the room to protest what Benjamin Netanyahu did today. But America didn't. And we're we've got Israel's back, and we're rich enough, and we're at the center of the world economy, and we have the biggest military in the world, and we're, got all the big Wall Street banks and monopolies, and we can just kind of cancel out the rest of the world, and Israel doesn't get stopped. Now, if that doesn't cause you as an American to go, wait a second, the whole world is against what Israel's doing except us, something's wrong here. I would agree. It's never been so blatant before. Often the world is divided about these things. There's division in the world over Ukraine. I think Russia is doing the right thing in Ukraine. They have no choice. I hope the war ends soon, right? There's division in the world when it comes to Taiwan. There are some countries that recognize Taiwan as the China government. I think they're completely wrong, but there is division in the world. There's no division in the world. Other than the United States, pretty much everybody, except maybe like the British, agree that what Israel's doing is completely unacceptable, and Israel is completely out of line and murderous and committing genocide. But we as America, we're carrying water. I mean, if that should cause everyone, as much as we love our country, we should be embarrassed that we're carrying water for this murder that is being carried out, that the whole world can see what Israel's doing. And America is saying, you know what? That's fine with us. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I don't like it one bit. So I just gave you my thoughts. One thing I will throw out, another thought on the James Comey thing. Is that, the FBI are not our friends. The FBI was formed originally as the wing of the Department of Justice that was given as a gift to J. Edgar Hoover. Mitchell Palmer was the Attorney General. And after the Russian Revolution, a weird man, a very strange man who was in the closet gay and liked to put on women's clothes and lived with his mother until she died, who was a librarian at the Library of Congress. He went around giving speeches about the evils of communism. And all kinds of members of Congress had their homes blown up. Bombs were set off at these members of Congress's homes. They were really freaked out by these bombs that were exploding in the members of Congress's homes. And this weird librarian guy who lived with his mom and was gay and put on women's clothes and, had not much of a social life and hung out at the library all day. He started giving lectures about what communism is and why it's the most scary thing. He was like the original McCarthyist Red Baiter. And he was so good at that Mitchell Palmer created a special wing of the Department of Justice just for him, just for J. Edgar Hoover. And it was called the BOI, the Bureau of Investigation, and eventually they called it the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And a lot of people think that the FBI are the federal police, and they are wrong. There have always been J-men. You read an old comic book from the 1920s, they don't talk about the FBI, they talk about J-men. And there have always been U.S. Marshals. You ever go watch an old cowboy movie, the U.S. Marshals? Who do the U.S. Marshals work for? Not any state. They work for the federal government. We have always had federal cops, U.S. Marshals, J-men, that's Justice Department men, right? But the FBI was a special, weird military order, right? It's kind of like in ancient Rome, interestingly. In ancient Rome, they had a big army. Every Roman citizen who was male served in the military, right? But they had different sections of the military that worshipped different gods, right? The Navy, they worshipped the god Neptune, and they had certain beliefs and certain rituals. And they went to pray at the temple of the god Neptune, and they had it was like a whole thing for the ocean wing of the Roman military. And the infantry, right? The soldiers, the centurions, they worshipped Mars, the god of war, the red planet. And they had a special temple for the god Mars and special rituals that they engaged in and all kinds of weird stuff that they did. And FBI is like that. It's not called the Society for the Worship of the Deity. It's not, they don't, as far as I know, they don't do any weird mystical religious stuff, but they are a particular wing of the federal police that has a very specific ideology, and it's very much dedicated to fighting communism, right? Other wings of the government, right? You have the Bureau of Alcohol, Firearms, and Tobacco. But the FBI is just the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but it was started by this weird, fanatical anti-communist in the 1920s who was obsessed with fighting communism and decided that we needed a special elite police force that would guard the country. He said, the FBI is as close to you as your telephone. And it started out in the 1920s as this anti-communist fighting force. Then it turned into very much they worshipped J. Edgar Hoover. They had comic books about J. Edgar Hoover that were printed with government money, and distributed. They had special FBI radio programs about J. Edgar Hoover going after bank robbers and stuff. And they made J. Edgar Hoover this kind of weird guy who talked with a lisp and, this kind of socially awkward librarian. They made him like a household name, this like action hero on the radio. And then in the 50s, during McCarthyism, they went crazy and they supported Joe McCarthy and they terrorized people and went after Joe McCarthy's opponents, and they fought with the CIA, right? The CIA was one of their biggest enemies. The CIA did the Congress for Cultural Freedom, was funding leftists. They hated leftists. They were conservative. And so there was like an FBI versus CIA thing. The FBI backed Joe McCarthy. The CIA was against Joe McCarthy and up into the presidency of Lyndon Johnson, right? I used to work for Ramsey Clark, the Attorney General. And Ramsey Clark was the Attorney General of the United States. And there are recordings of phone calls with him saying, I don't know what we're going to do about J. Edgar Hoover, right? And that J. Edgar Hoover was wiretapping people illegally. And it was against the law to wiretap somebody without a warrant. But there was no penalty for it. And Ramsey Clark's on the phone with Lyndon Johnson saying, well, he's wiretapping people all over the country and that's illegal, but there's no consequence for doing so. It's technically illegal, but he's doing it anyway. And, maybe it would be thrown out if it's, entered in court against somebody, but he's still doing it. And that was true. And J. Edgar Hoover was wiretapping everybody in the country, wiretapping all the politicians, the Kennedys, all kinds of people, and making deals with people. And when Richard Nixon came into office, Richard Nixon, he fired Ramsey Clark, got rid of Ramsey Clark. And the first thing he did was tell the FBI to take the gloves off and go after the Black Panthers and the Black Freedom Movement very viciously. The FBI is it is very much, it is in the sense when you talk about the ancient Roman mystery religions, right? How, the Romans had a special belief system for the infantry, a special belief system for the Navy, right? That's what the FBI is. The FBI is a mystery cult of the American deep state, right? You'll notice FBI agents, right? I hope all of you have never encountered one. I hope you never encounter one in your life, but you'll notice that FBI agents, there's something about them, right? The way their faces operate are different than the way other people's faces operate. And it's, you could say that about a lot of people. You could say that about people in different professions, and it's nothing spooky about it. I'm not trying to say they're under a trance or in a spell. It's nothing like that. But like the FBI, there's a certain personality that their training cultivates, right? It's a long process. You go to the Army, you go to boot camp for 8 weeks or something. They have like a 9-month training thing where they train you and they polygraph test you and they go after you and, do all kinds of stuff. And FBI agents are weird. I'm saying weird not in the sense that everyone who's deviant or weird should be, but there's something about them. If you ever deal with FBI agents, you deal with a cop on the street. He's like a normal guy. He just happens to be wearing a blue outfit. And, and sometimes cops, people, if you carry a gun in your belt, right, you might lean to one side or whatever. But cops, generally, they just seem like other people, right? They might, have a certain authoritarian side or, there might be aspects of them that kind of come with the thing. But in their interactions, you can't really tell who's a cop and who's not. But FBI agents, there is just something. And I'm not talking about FBI informants, people who cooperate with them, but actual FBI agents. They are subjected to a huge amount of training. They have a special belief system that is the FBI belief system. They are on a mission. They are above the law. Their job is to be the secret police that make sure that America fights against communism and fights against subversive ideas. And they are trained in a certain way. And I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I don't know that much about it. But when you read the history of the FBI is not the federal police. It's not the federal marshals. It's not the G-men or the J-men or whatever they're called. It's not the Bureau of Alcohol, Firearms, and Tobacco. It's something different, right? It is an entity of its own, and it's not good. It's not good. You read that letter they wrote to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., urging him to commit suicide. It's not good, right? And Kash Patel is not one of them. And again, they tell me Kash Patel's a fascist. Kash Patel's this. Well, I don't care what he is. He's not one of them. James Comey, you look at his mannerisms, the way he speaks, the way he forms his words, he's one of them. He's one of the FBI robots. Kash Patel is not. Kash Patel may be a pro-Israel guy, from what I understand. Kash Patel may be a conservative or libertarian in a lot of ways, but he's not an FBI guy. And so it looks like Kash Patel, to some degree or other, can control the FBI, an entity that basically considers itself to be above the law, right? The FBI considers itself to be above the law, and Kash Patel is not from their mystery religion, their mystery cult, their mystery, I don't know what you want to call it. He's not from their FBI secret order, whatever you want to call it. He's not from the FBI. He's an outsider. He's an outsider who got the job thanks to Trump because the FBI moved against Trump and was against Trump. Trump put an enemy of the FBI in charge of the FBI. Good for Trump. And now Kash Patel and Pam Bondi are prosecuting one of the top FBI guys, James Comey. When James Comey got fired, loads of FBI employees, according to the reports in the press at the time, changed their Facebook profiles to James Comey's face. Right? I'll tell you a little story. Again, this is a news item that people forget. Right? Leonard Peltier was a Native American activist who was charged with killing FBI agents. He didn't do it. Right? He was a Native American activist. He was in a Native American armed group, and they took over a building, and the FBI surrounded the encampment, and there was a shootout, and the FBI agents killed their own agent with friendly fire, most likely, according to the ballistics. However, the FBI basically said, you know what, we consider that to be Leonard Peltier's fault because he was engaged in this armed fight. And even though they shot their own agent, they decided, you know what, we're going to charge Leonard Peltier with murder. And so Leonard Peltier sat in prison. Now, he's recently been released because he has cancer, but he's in house arrest, right? And Leonard Peltier sat in prison for decades for a crime that he didn't commit. He didn't kill the FBI agents. The FBI agents, it was friendly fire. Regardless, in the year 2000, Bill Clinton was about to leave office. George W. Bush had won the election. In November, December came along. January rolled around. Bill Clinton was about to leave office. And then it looked like Bill Clinton was going to free Leonard Peltier, probably for George Soros. Now, explain that. How does that work? George Soros is this liberal who overthrows governments and funds liberal protest movements for the American government. He loves Native Americans, right? George Soros is very liberal, and Native Americans, they don't use technology in his mind, or they're back to nature or something. He likes Native Americans. So it looks like George Soros wanted Bill Clinton to free Leonard Peltier. And so did a lot of liberals. David Geffen is a huge supporter of Hillary Clinton. David Geffen, isn't he like a rock star or something? David Geffen is a big supporter of the Clintons, and he also, likes Leonard Peltier, right? Or he's the wealthiest person in the entertainment industry, the guy who owns DreamWorks, David Geffen. He's like kind of a weird hippie, and they liked Leonard Peltier. And they wanted Bill Clinton to let Leonard Peltier out of jail. And there were rumors going around that Bill Clinton was going to free Leonard Peltier. And then what happened? FBI Director Louis Frey mobilized 300 agents to surround the White House. And Bill Clinton changed his mind real quick and didn't pardon Leonard Peltier. Look it up. It was in the press. Leonard Peltier, FBI Director Louis Frey. I will set. It was in the New York Times. It was in the Washington Post. 300 FBI agents came to the White House and basically threatened Bill Clinton. Not directly. They didn't directly threaten him. They surrounded the White House. 300 agents walked over to the White House in their suits and uniforms and made it clear to Bill Clinton he better not free Leonard Peltier. Now, I don't like the Clintons. I'm not a big fan of Bill and Hillary, but, they were the elected presidents. They should decide if they free Leonard Peltier or not. But when you have 300 members of a federal agency surrounding the White House, that makes pretty clear, and you'll notice when Barack Obama was leaving office, he freed all kinds of people. Freed Chelsea Manning, freed, some of the Puerto Rican activists, freed a lot of just nonviolent drug offenders and others. But then there was one prisoner in the federal prison system that Barack Obama did not touch. Who was it? Leonard Peltier. And when Joe Biden left office, he did not free Leonard Peltier. He just gave him house arrest. He has cancer. He's old. He's in his 80s. And Joe Biden couldn't even free him. He just said, you know what? He can be in house arrest for the rest of his life. He's not allowed to give interviews. It's like Leonard Peltier is still in prison. It's just in his house, basically. Because they're so afraid of the FBI. That's fucked up, folks. The FBI should not control our political process. And the CIA shouldn't. And the U.S. Army intelligence shouldn't, and the Pentagon shouldn't. And when we talk about deep state, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the ultra rich that have set up the think tanks and the foundations, and the politicians that work for them that have set up a huge apparatus of the FBI and the CIA and the intelligence agencies and the Council on Foreign Relations and the Asia Society, and there's this whole apparatus, and it's not clear where the government starts and where the think tanks and private projects set up by the ultra-rich end. It's like one big continuum. The Council on Foreign Relations, the Asia Society, the American Enterprise Institute, the Heritage Foundation. It's a big apparatus of government and big money combined. And they want to rule the world. And they want to keep the world poor. And they believe in Malthusianism and degrowth. And they are tied into defending a global system of imperialism, not the interests of average American working people, not the interests even of the American economy and the American industrial capitalists, but rather the interests of an entire global system. And they have this agenda of defending imperialism, and they want Americans to be poorer, and they want to stop the population from rising. They want to reduce the amount of food in the world. They're against global crop output increasing. They want to reduce electrification. They have a game plan for saving capitalism and saving the global economic system by reducing us all to utter poverty. You'll own nothing and be happy about it. You'll live in a pod. You'll eat bugs. You've heard it all, right? It's called Malthusianism. To save the capitalist system, they want to grind us all into poverty. I say no. I say Russia and China, they used to be poor, but they raised themselves up by breaking out of the Western system. I think, Cuba used to be poor, but it broke itself free and was able to wipe out illiteracy and build a modern healthcare system. I think Iran and other countries, the African continent is full of countries that have broken free, and great African leader Ibrahim Traore, who we published this book about, Africa's Flame, this great African leader. And there's a whole section of the world that just wants to grow and build and construct. And I think America should join that section of the world. But that means we have to break out of the domination of the big monopolies. The big bankers and corporations that run the United States have to lose their power. We need a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government of action that fights for working families. That's what we need. And we need to break out of imperialism. We need to stop the emerging low-wage police state. We need to stop the march toward World War III. We need a government that invests in people and communities and builds people up. And the indictment of James Comey is a step in that direction. A small one, maybe not even done for particularly good reasons. I don't care. The indictment of James Comey is a good move. I hope John Bolton's next. And I hope we can break out of this irrational system and we can connect the United States to the rising new economy in the world. That's what I hope for. So on that note, folks, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us? Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? I will start calling people out. Calling them out. Ryan in Kansas City. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Alex in Brazil. Dan in the LA area. Create real solutions. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Kew Gardens. Checkpoint Charlie. Hemp Car. Jacob in Wisconsin. Alex in Brazil. Patricia in Massachusetts, Jane in New Zealand, St. David's, Bermuda, Bendigo, Australia, David Fox, John in Florida. Good to have you with us. Rise from Adelaide, Australia. Good to have you with us. Canada gives me a lot to think on. Oh, Canada. Anyway, all right. Nasser in Burbank. Good to see you, Nasser. Good to see you. Names and locations. Anybody else with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Who is with us? Who's with us? Jeff in Victoria, Australia. Good to see you, Jeff. Good to have you with us. All right. Okay. All right. So right now, as I've said before, if you want to send a question, there are 3 ways to send a question. First way to send your question is with a Rumble rant. You can send me a Rumble rant. Rumble rant. You can send me a Rumble rant. Or you can Cash App me at CalebMoppin22. But the best way, the absolute best way to send your question is buy me a coffee. And somebody did. Bandsaw Bandit sent me a question, and he will be the first one to get an answer. And there was somebody who sent a question earlier. They sent it like earlier today, I believe, or last night. And I will answer that one too. They sent it like not during the show, but that's okay. And I'm going to answer that one as well. I will answer their question as well. Right. Kate Johnson sent a question as well, and I will answer that one as well. So, but yeah, please send questions, because that's what I'm here to do, is to answer your questions in the second half of the show. 3 ways to send your questions. And then Leo Messi sent a Rumble rant. That's appreciated as well. So send your questions. Send your questions, and I will answer them. So the first question that I'm going to answer, hold on, I will just read it. Bandsaw Bandit said, off topic, but option on how authorities release the information of evidence prior to the trials of the Charlie Kirk bullets, ice bullets. Usually this wouldn't happen as a potential contamination of juries. Seems fishy, political manipulation, knowing the climate. Right. So I will say the information that we're getting about the whole Charlie Kirk case is weird as hell. So the big thing everyone's saying is there's no exit wound. And that doesn't make any sense. Someone shoots somebody with that high power of a rifle at that distance. The bullet goes in, the bullet goes out. But it didn't. That doesn't make any sense. Then also people are saying the bullets had writing on the shell casings. Now we're hearing the bullets did not have the writing, or did they? I'm hearing so much conflicting information. Something's off. That's weird. And then again, that even if the shooting itself was done by a lone wolf, as we're being told, even then, why did we get so much conflicting information? They're clearly trying to foment political division, even if the killing itself was organic, right? Which I'm not saying it was. I mean, a lot of people are saying the official story doesn't add up. He was criticizing Israel and all of that. But even if it was just this lone wolf guy who did it, even if that was the case, why did they give us all this information, right? Apparently the shell casings did have writing on them. They didn't have writing on them. And why did the bullet not have an exit wound? It's not still inside of him. Where's the bullet? Where's the bullet? Something's off. And something's off. And something's not right. And I think we can all agree on that. And it's almost like they want us to see it. This isn't a case of like everyone says it's a normal story and there's a few weird people on the internet questioning it. This is a case of like everyone is like, what happened here? All right, this isn't a case of, it's almost like they're transitioning. In the past, most Americans didn't disagree. But now, so many people disagree. It's almost like they want people to think the government might kill you if you disagree. All right, it's starting to get that way. All right, it reminds me. I will not forget the Crocus City music concert, where the U.S. government basically announced a couple weeks beforehand there's going to be a shooting at a concert, just so Russia knew where it came from. Right, just so Russia knew where it came from. And it's like in this case, they want the American people to think that Charlie Kirk was killed by Israel, by powerful governments. They want that. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. And the amount of information we're getting, the amount of like mainstream speculation, it's weird. And like usually, if someone thought Israel killed somebody, Israel would ignore it. Then you got Netanyahu coming out the next day. Israel did not kill. Israel did not kill. Charlie Kirk, just so the folks know. And we got tweets from like the vice president. Israel didn't do it. Israel didn't do it. I mean, it's weird. They're playing some high level psychological games here, right? This is not your grandpa's false flag. Let me put it that way. All right, this is not the assassination of JFK. This is some weird psychological stuff. Sometimes I can't make up my mind. Sometimes I feel like the elite of the United States are completely incompetent and they don't know what they're doing. There are other times where I feel like they are very sophisticated. And the truth is they're probably both. There are some things that there are elite in the USA that are very, very sophisticated about, and there's some things they're not very good at. And the other thing to remember is there's no they, and that's really important. This idea that there's just one faction that secretly controls everything, if that was the case, things would go quite well. That's not the case, right? There are competing factions, competing conspiracies, competing elites that want different things. And yes, they do conspire, and yes, they do fight, but there's different groups doing it. It's not one cabal that secretly controls everything. And even if you think Israel controls everything, Israel's not a single entity. Did you know that? Like Netanyahu, there's a lot of the Israelis that want him out of there. There's a lot of Israelis that want a more moderate government. Netanyahu represents the settlers. He represents the hard Israeli right, Likud. So if you think Israel secretly controls everything, okay, but there's not just one Israel. There's different factions among the Israelis. There was like a color revolution going on against Netanyahu. It's not that simple, right? There's the idea that there's one group of people who just agrees on everything and secretly controls everything. That's just not how the world works. Okay, there are different people that have economic interests. There are people that will come together based on their economic or personal agenda and do things, but they often are fighting with other rich and powerful people who want different things. It's never that simple. And if you fall into the belief that there's one shadowy elite that rules it all, right? If that's your belief, then we're all powerless. We're all powerless. And then also, it doesn't make any sense why there's so much of a push and pull, right? And, and that's one of my big problems with the conspiracy narrative. And, I remember when Alex Jones was obscure. I first heard of Alex Jones when when Bush was having his second term. All these young Arab men came to the protests, the anti-war rallies in Cleveland with big stacks of DVDs of Alex Jones that they were just giving away. Right. It was 9/11 Truth DVDs. And I was like, who is this guy with a Southern accent who's, and it's all communism. It's all got this like libertarian anti-communist thing. I'd never heard of this guy. And Alex Jones has been around for quite some time, but he didn't become a big name really until the Trump thing. Like they started mentioning him on Saturday Night Live and things like that during the Trump years. But he was around for quite some time. He was known on the internet and in dissident circles. And the Alex Jones narrative, it's all a big conspiracy. It's all a conspiracy, right? It's all a plot. Everything's part of the big plot. And I mean, I listened to Alex Jones on Jimmy Dore, and, some of it was decent. And I remember that the long interview he did when he was kind of doing his comeback, he did his Jimmy Dore interview. And I love Jimmy Dore to death. I really do. He does great content. But after a while, I mean, he started talking about how the technology is actually invented by demons who, they take DMT and the demons come and give technology. And oh boy, an AI is going to come and it's the Trojan horse that comes from the demons that gave us I'm just like, oh God, this is getting awful. I mean, and it's a pessimistic worldview. There is no hope. There is no future. We're all going to die. The Illuminati and the space aliens and the DMT and the mushrooms and the satanic child eating. Oh my God. It's just, it's not what people need to hear. I like people questioning the foreign policy status quo. I like that. And I like a lot of things, but I mean, every so often he will just come out with stuff that it just sounds like. The other thing is that there's like standard Republican neocon stuff mixed in with Alex Jones's stuff. He will say a lot of good things, and then he'll just throw in some like neocon Republican crap. He was saying that October 7th was done by the Biden administration. And his basis for this was that Biden unfroze Iranian money that was in a South Korean bank account. Well, first of all, so that's Iran's money that the U.S. government stole by freezing it in the South Korean bank account, right? And they unfroze it, so Iran got some of their money back. Iran does not control Hamas. Like, so the idea that Biden unfroze money that Iran already had and the USA stole. And of course, the neocons, the Zionists, are like, oh, Biden gave all this money to Iran, which no, they didn't. Iran got their money back after the USA stole it. And somehow that was Biden paying for Hamas. Like, Hamas doesn't obey Iran. Hamas was on the opposite side of Iran in Syria. Hamas doesn't like, Hamas and Iran are not the same. Hamas are Sunnis. Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine, a breakaway from it. Iran are Shia. I mean, they're not the same. They're different groups. Iran might help. Hamas might help the Palestinians. But, you know, the Iran-aligned group in Palestine is called the Islamic Jihad in Palestine, the IJP. You know, they're the Iran-inspired group in Palestine. And I mean, and Saudi Arabia funds Hamas to some degree or other too. There's a lot of Middle Eastern countries that give financial support to the government of Gaza. So the idea that because Joe Biden unfroze some of Iran's money and got some money, that was Joe Biden ordering October 7th. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And you have to be really, really ignorant of, like, it's like one does not equal the other, does not equal the other. There's like three broken links in that chain. But it's a neocon talking point, right? Because Iran and Hamas and terrorists and Muslims are all the same, and they all just want to kill the Jews. And that's just not true. And that's a Zionist talking point, right? That Iran did October 7th. Iran did not do October 7th. Right? Iran supports the Palestinians, and so does Qatar, and so does Saudi Arabia, and so do a lot of countries. And Hamas is an organization that is kind of at odds with Iran in a number of ways. They have a relationship, but they're not completely lining up. That it, you know, yeah. And so you just hear him say that, and he just said, "Oh well, it's pretty clear Biden did October 7th because he unfroze he gave Iran money in South Korea." And it's like, that's not true. And that's something like Marco Rubio might say, and it's dumb, right? And you know, so it's like I like a lot of what Alex Jones will say, but every so often he just throws something out there like that. And what's weird is that's a neocon narrative. That is a, you know, it's like, it's not, you know, so anyway, sorry, I just had to do that. Now, Kate Johnson asked me, Kate Johnson said, to what event do you link the Democratic Party's sellout of the working class? I thought NAFTA. I heard some say it was the establishment centrist Democrats who refused to back Jesse Jackson. That's interesting. What I would say is the Democratic Party has never really been a working class political party. And it really wasn't until the Roosevelt administration that the Democrats were really seen as kind of a populist party. The Republican Party had been the party of Lincoln and the party of the small farmers, right? And then the Democrats were the party of the Dixiecrats. And populism kind of went into, when populism became racist, William Jennings Bryan brought the populist movement into the Democratic Party. You know, and you had figures like McAdoo, right, who was like a racist, but he was also, you know, somebody who was associated with like the 8-hour workday and things like that. And you had the Democrats advocating kind of populist reforms. But then with Roosevelt, you had the welfare state, Social Security, and the labor unions. That's when the Democrats really became left. You couldn't really call the Democrats left until Roosevelt. Then the Democrats were leftists, kind of. They weren't really left wing until then, until Roosevelt. You know, and then with Roosevelt, the Democrats became leftists. And Roosevelt was pro-growth, right? I mean, he was all about building things. He was very anti-Malthusian. He studied Stalin's 5-year plans and the Works Progress Administration and all of that. And it was with the rise of Jimmy Carter, right, that the new left, right, the anti-working class left, the Malthusian and, Congress for Cultural Freedom left kind of took control of the Democratic Party, right? Lyndon Johnson dropped out of the election, right? And then the 1960 election, it was Hubert Humphrey versus Richard Nixon. Nixon won. Nixon got reelected. Nixon was impeached. Gerald Ford was president. Then you had an election, and Jimmy Carter was elected president. And Jimmy Carter was the first new left president. And Jimmy Carter, he published the Global 2000 Report, which was a Malthusian manifesto. He opposed nuclear power. And Jimmy Carter launched Abscam, which was very much a purge of Democrats who believed in growth and were associated with labor unions. And Abscam, where they had an FBI agent dressed up as an Arab sheik who went around and, arrested members of Congress for bribery. And there's a couple cases where the member of Congress actually turned away the money and gave the money back, and the jury still convicted them. And Abscam was very much like a purge of what they called the smokestack Democrats, the Democrats that were pro-growth. But even then, even in the 80s, you had, in the 80s, the Democrats still were kind of doing the labor union thing. And I don't know. I mean, the Democrats still are aligned with the labor unions. But, Bill Clinton came into office, and Bill Clinton was very much a pro-neoliberalism Democrat. He enacted neoliberal economic reforms. The DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council, was very much an effort to bring neoliberal economics into the Democratic Party. And that Bill Clinton was not the new left of Jimmy Carter. Bill Clinton was very much a compromise with the Republicans, right? That the new left kind of went into hibernation after the Reagan revolution, if so to speak, right? Jimmy Carter and his allies, the Brzezinski faction, was kind of pushed to the side. They were always there. They were always kind of lurking and, pushing for environmental laws and, doing various things and running the college campuses and running the intelligence apparatus. But they didn't have, power within the United States so much after the Reagan pushback. But then with Bill Clinton came in and he was like a neoliberal Democrat. He was very much, DLC was very much a parallel to New Labor in Britain. And Bill Clinton and Tony Blair are very similar figures, right? They both are very, very good speakers who can speak in a very powerful and emotional way. And they're great as long as you don't listen to what they actually say. Right? And Obama was similar. Obama sounded great as long as you didn't listen to what he actually said. Right. It was, the tone, it sounds very exciting and radical, but it's like what they're actually advocating is just regular shit. Bill Clinton did a lot of things that were, cuts in social spending. Making criminals, convicted criminals, or welfare recipients or high school kids do the work of government employees. That was a really big thing that the Clinton administration did. Take the job of government employees and make criminals do it for free, make high school kids do it as volunteers, make welfare recipients do it one day a week in order to get their welfare check or something like that. How do we take the jobs of government employees that have benefits, union representation, and gradually just start giving them to people who have to do them for free? That was a big thing that Bill Clinton did. And NAFTA, right, the North American Free Trade Agreement, North American Free Trade Agreement, yeah. And NAFTA was certainly, that was a policy that certainly hurt the working class of the United States. Bill Clinton did a lot of neoliberal economic reforms. He certainly did. But as he did it, he sounded amazing. He sounded like a populist. He sounded like a Southern populist while he did it, but he carried out policies that were to the contrary. Tony Blair is very similar. Tony Blair was, New Labor. And New Labor was, the Labor Party needs to move into the future. The world has changed. And he was very much, he got rid of Clause 4, and the Labor Party became a party that believed in cuts in public spending, etc. But Tony Blair just sounds great. I mean, he just sounds amazing. He just sounds like such a caring, hardworking guy, and that that a lot of the things, if Reagan had tried to get rid of welfare for single mothers, there had been a huge resistance. So it took a Democrat to do it. Mass incarceration. Bill Clinton, he had a TV ad. People forget this. He had a TV ad of himself with a chain gang, right? Saying basically, I am a Democrat, but I will lock up black people, right? And that was something that they attacked him for. I believe Jerry Brown, the California Democrat, attacked him for that in the ad, and he just said, no, I think it's great. Chain gangs, great. And then during his presidential campaign, Bill Clinton went back and executed a black man in the state of in his home state, went home to sign the death warrant of a black man just to make a point. And that the super predators, right? That was the Hillary Clinton talked about super predators. There was a demonization of young black men that was very, very massive. And I don't know. I mean, but even like Bill Clinton, things were different, right? This was pre-woke. I mean, the Democrats were a left-wing party. I mean, but there was still, again, labor unions and like economic leftism and not the focus on identity politics. And some of it wasn't just that they didn't focus on identity politics, though they went the other way. Right. And that was a big part. I mean, when Bill Clinton spoke at Rainbow Push, Jesse Jackson's, group, he gave a whole speech condemning a rap artist who'd performed there the night before, Sister Soja, and complaining about how she was against police and she was supposedly racist against white people. And that was, and he gave another, like a Father's Day speech, if I remember correctly, Bill Clinton, where he was basically talking down to the black community and telling them that, that they were a problem. And it was almost like, it wasn't that they weren't focused on identity politics. It was the opposite. It was like Democrats had to say we're racist in order to get people to vote for them. Right. It was one thing to hear that from Republicans, but it was like Democrats, in order to be acceptable outside of urban areas, right, in order to be like mainstream, in order to win national elections, Democrats were expected to be racist. It was very, very weird. Very weird. Things have changed a lot for the better, right? And that's Joe Biden, by the way. Biden was very much part of the Clinton era of the Democratic Party, right? Biden, you watch some of the speeches that Biden gave, where he calls for building a wall on the border, and, he called for, the Biden crime bill. And, Biden was all about corruption. I mean, he was all about, you know what I'm saying? He was all about the racist machine of the Democratic Party, no question about it. So I don't know. I don't think the Democrats were ever a working class party, but the emphasis has certainly changed. I think the Roosevelt administration, in a lot of ways, was very, very progressive. I think Roosevelt was probably the best president we ever had. He's close to Lincoln. But aside from Roosevelt and Henry Wallace, I don't think we've ever really had anyone in the White House who really cared that much about the working class, except for maybe Abraham Lincoln. But the Democratic Party has shifted its emphasis. Let me put it that way. Coming out of the Roosevelt years, the Kennedy years, Johnson, Truman, they had to kind of voice kind of a social democratic message. Carter introduced the identity politics thing, and then he was out. And then Bill Clinton brought in a rolling back of the democratic of the welfare state, and also a level of racial stuff. And then then Barack Obama brought in a new level of like confused identity politics and stuff. And I don't know, it's all, the Democratic Party has evolved and adapted. I will say the Republican Party is the party that has changed the most in my lifetime. The Democrats have evolved and shifted, and they're certainly not what they once were. But the Republican Party, I never in a million years would have ever thought that I would ever be saying that a Republican president was better than his opposition, which at this point, I think Trump is better than the people opposing him. As much as Trump has been a huge disappointment as president, The people that are opposing him are worse. And I never would have thought that, because in the Bush years, the Republicans were what the Democrats are now. The Republicans were the ones who said, oh, you don't agree with the war? Well, why do you hate our freedom? Why do you hate our troops? Why do you hate America? Right. And I mean, the Bush people were the woke people, right? Where you weren't allowed to disagree with them. That sounds like something a terrorist might say. That sounds like somebody who hates America might say. I mean, the Republican Party of the Bush years was the party of, don't question authority and don't question the government. And with Barack Obama, I mean, it seemed very dramatic. I knew all these Republicans who had never questioned anything, and suddenly they were libertarians. They were against all the wars as soon as Obama got in. But even the Romney campaign of 2012 was weird. It was still, it had a really big neocon side. There was an element of like populism. Do you remember that speech that was given during that campaign? That's something I will never forget. When Clint Eastwood did like, a vaudeville act at the Republican convention of 2012. That was something else. Clint Eastwood, the cowboy actor, came out, and he came out and said, I'm going to do a speech. And he had an empty chair sitting next to him. I'm going to imagine that Barack Obama is in this chair. And he gave a speech in his Clint Eastwood voice to an empty chair of Barack Obama. And there were a couple moments in that speech that I thought were very left-wing, that sounded very leftist. One of them was, he said, Mr. President, I know everyone was crying when you first got elected. I started crying when I heard about all the Americans who don't have jobs. And then the audience applauded. Well, geez, the Republican Party that I knew said, if you don't have a job, it's because you're a lazy bum. It's because you want the government to do everything for you. You want a handout. Well, we ain't going to cry for you, you lazy shacky. That wasn't him. He said, I'm crying for all the Americans who don't have jobs. And the audience applauded. I thought that was interesting. Later in the speech, he said, Mr. President, you said that the war in Iraq was wrong, but the war in Afghanistan was right. Well, I think we don't belong in Afghanistan. I think we ought to bring the troops home now. And again, the audience went crazy and applauded. Now, the rest of the speech, the stupid vaudeville speech from Clint Eastwood, was utter crap. But those two moments, I thought, wait a second, what Republican Party is this? Right? I mean, I'm not trying to insult Republicans, but if you are as old as me, during the Bush years, the Republicans would not applaud for an audience, for crying for people who don't have jobs. It was, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you don't have a job, that's because you're a lazy bum, you're a loser, and we shouldn't give you a handout, and stop whining and complaining. And that was not the Republican Party. And the Republican Party definitely wasn't applauding for bringing the troops home now. That was what hippies and anti-war people and, said, but bring the troops home now. That was, again, it was a shift, right? The Ron Paul thing, shifted the conversation in a lot of ways. Even in 2012, things were different. But Mitt Romney was a Mormon, right? He was from that Mormon CIA axis, and he was very much, it was still the neocons, right? Trump was a completely different entity. Trump was the version of Ron Paul that was for mass consumption, right? You couldn't have had Trump without Ron Paul, but Trump was Ron Paul for mass consumption. And Trump is also, Ron Paul is a libertarian. He's an ideological libertarian. Trump, there's a whiff of, Ron Paul's not a populist. Ron Paul is a nice doctor who doesn't want the government involved in your life. And I just don't think the government should be involved in that. I'm Jimmy Stewart, he's kind of like Jimmy Stewart, and he doesn't think the government, ought to be involved. I don't think that the government should be taxing people. Who needs the government? Who here would do heroin if the government wasn't there? I wouldn't do heroin. I don't need the government to tell me not to do heroin. That's Ron Paul, right? And he's just this like quirky old man who believes in libertarianism. I just think that we ought to privatize things and get rid of the Federal Reserve System. That's what I think. That's Ron Paul. He's this nice old libertarian grandpa who, is non-interventionist, whatever. Trump took a lot of the Ron Paul themes, but mixed into it is this, like, I am going to fight for you. I'm going to, there's like a whiff of like populist fighting, rah, rah, get them, and some of that's good and some of it's bad. There's some of it is this kind of bully culture that's not good. And that's one thing the left did criticize about Trump. There was this kind of like, we're going to punish people, we're going to hurt people. That's not a good thing about Trump. But there's also this, I am going to fight against the elite for you. And that's very good, honestly. And I'm glad to see that. And that's probably the best part of Trumpism, is this kind of anti-elite tone. And if the left, that used to be leftism, and the left refuses to do that, right? The left has just gotten to be so cringe. Everything left in America at this point is cringe. There's nothing left in America I can feel comfortable with anymore, right? Bernie Sanders, I liked some of that. It was a little weird, right? He's like an old nutty professor, an old man with like messy hair, and I don't think the corporations, you could kind of get behind that, but that's all forgotten. And Bernie Sanders is now a thing of the past, and now it's just AOC, and it's just the squad, and it's just Kamala Harris, and it's just cringe. It's all just cringe now. It's all just cringe, right? And I mean, it's just leftism. Everything left in America has just gotten to be toxic, right? I mean, and I hate to say that, right? I was really excited about John Edwards. You remember John Edwards? John Edwards was the vice presidential candidate of John Kerry. He ran, and he was a Southern populist. He ran like a Southern populist campaign. John Edwards was great. He talked about two Americas, right? And I thought he was great. And they canceled him very viciously over stuff about his personal life that, I mean, and then they tried to even throw him in prison, right? They really went after John Edwards because he was a populist and he ran he was good at it. He was a trial lawyer, and he was corrupt, and he was tied to the machine, but he ran a populist campaign about two Americas, and it's not the rich versus the poor. It's the very rich versus everyone else. And all of this. And, and they, it wasn't enough to just, right. I mean, the affair, I mean, do you know that he was even really married to his wife anymore? You know how that works with politicians. Okay. Politicians can't get divorced because it's embarrassing, and they're millionaires. And so they're still technically married, but they don't live together and all of that. I mean, I'm not saying that necessarily was the case. You don't really know what was going on there, right? You don't know. And how many politicians have had affairs and they just kind of push it under the rug and don't talk about it with him? They used the affair to just completely destroy his reputation. And then they tried to throw him in jail over nothing, right? Over some like tax thing or something. I mean, I think it was that he didn't drop out, right? He pissed off the Clintons. He was supposed to drop out and let, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama run the race. He stayed in it too long. And he made somebody mad. And also, I would argue that, again, this isn't something people want to hear. In a weird way, the way John Edwards was talking was more of a threat to the status quo, right? That if John Edwards, had built a campaign talking about two Americas and the very rich versus everybody else in a charming Southern accent, yeah, I'm telling you, John Edwards, and I met a lot of people who met John Edwards, and they told me they loved him. He was just so charming. He was just great. And that, John Edwards could have really been an effective populist leader, and they weren't going to have that, right? Identity politics, women power, it's one thing, right? Black power is another thing. But if you start doing that, populism, fighting for the working class, that is, that's just not allowed. So, there you go. There you go. All right. So we got a couple more Buy Me a Coffees that have come in. This one, he says, there may be child trafficking rings. Sure. Reptilians. Don't know about the reptilians. Trans operatives. What's a trans operative? What's that? Is that like somebody who works for the trans people but isn't trans? I don't know what a trans operative. Assassinations. Yes, there are assassinations. Pointing fingers. Yeah, plenty of that. Whatisms, etc. But where does that lead us? attention to some of these things have merit, but it's not what is dividing us in the end. Distractions to keep us in the weeds. Importance of family and community neglected, and the breakdown encouraged. Go and hug your loved ones. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. Ultimately, we need solutions. We need solutions. That's what we need. We need answers. And, we need, that's what our 4-point plan with CPI is. It's 4 policies that, if enacted, would dramatically change the nature of the U.S. economy and make life better. We need solutions. And, one thing I have said, and I'll say this again, right? And this might even sound kind of like some of the stuff that Trotskyites say, and I would disagree. I don't think it's only a Trotskyite thing. But one way that you can spot a fraud, right? If someone's going around calling themselves a socialist or a communist, there's a lot of them nowadays. One thing you'll notice they all have in common is they all have a minimum and maximum program. And that is fraudulent, right? And I mean, all these groups, right? The Revolutionary Communist Party, right? They have a maximum program. Violently overthrow the government, establish communism and the dictatorship of the proletariat. Okay, yeah, that's not going to happen, and it's not realistic. So what are they actually advocating? Impeach Trump. Crickets, right? Well, their minimum program is just what the Democrats are already doing. And then they have a maximum program that sounds like you're from planet Saturn, right? Some crazy communist shit that's never going to happen. And, all that is that you're using the crazy communist shit that's never going to happen to recruit teenagers, to recruit, people that are interested in communism. And then you're using them to be tools of the Democratic Party. That's PSL. I went through PSL's election platform. It was an effective combination. It switched back and forth between stuff that Joe Biden advocates and crazy communist shit that doesn't even make any goddamn sense. Right? I have PSL's like What Socialism Would Be Like book. And I thought it was funny. I thought that, it was written like, imagine that, after the revolution, they're going to have a magic wand and they're just going to go around abolishing things. Bing, abolish landlordism. Bing, abolish racism. Bing. And they never explain how they're going to abolish these things. Abolish landlordism. So what does that mean? Does that mean that, that no one is legally allowed to rent to anybody else? So all the people that are renting their apartments get kicked out because there's no more landlordism and they're all on the street? Does that mean the people who live in the apartments become the owners? And that's like, and did the landowners get compensated for that? You have to explain what that means. They don't explain, just abolish landlordism. Oh, okay. Landlordism is bad. That's people having to pay somebody else where they live. We're going to abolish it. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't even mean anything, right? I mean, you have to explain how you're going to do that, right? I mean, what is it? Give me an actual policy, But these group sickles have no idea. They have absolutely no idea. It's just, and I read PSL's little book about what socialism is going to be, and they're just going to abolish all these things. Racism, homophobia, fossil fuels, bing, bing, bing. They're just going to go around with a magic wand and start pointing it at things they don't like, and they're just going to all vanish. It's crazy, right? And then we're going to set up a revolutionary government for those who do the work. We're going to have smash the power of the capitalist elite. We're going to dismantle imperialism and racism. All this stuff that's like grandiose, and they don't even explain what it is they're going to do, right? It's just all these grandiose phrases. But then whenever they talk about anything that is real, it's stuff that's in the Joe Biden platform. It's, raise the minimum wage, tax fossil fuels more, and it's just stuff that Joe Biden's going to do anyway. Well, that's how you can tell why PSL exists. PSL is there to recruit young communists to work for Joe Biden, right? A transitional program. That is what a serious revolutionary group will do. They will put forward stuff that could actually be implemented that would make dramatic changes. And Trotsky talked about this, but Lenin talked about this, and all the communists that have ever come to power did this. I've read to you many times the transitional program of the Workers' Party of Korea. It's great. It's like 14 points that don't seem that radical, but they're things that only the Korean Workers' Party could deliver on. I don't have to read them again. I've read it on here so many times, but go and read the 14-point transitional program. It's stuff that all kinds of people on the Korean Peninsula could see being implemented. Confiscate the property of the Japanese collaborators. Create a national healthcare service, right? Fund movie theaters and arts programs in the schools, create universal literacy. I mean, it's a really, and it actually includes the right to private property. Protect private property is included in there, right? I mean, you read it, it's not that radical of a program, but it's things that everybody pretty much in the northern half of the Korean Peninsula wanted, and only the Korean Workers' Party was willing to deliver. That's a transitional program, right? And the Bolsheviks, go and read the program of the Bolshevik Party, right? Ending World War I, public control of banking, giving women the right to vote, separation of church and state. You read it, it was a program that only the Bolsheviks could deliver, that most people in Russia at the time would have been for, right? That is what a serious revolutionary party does, is they put forward real policies that could actually be implemented, that would change property relations and challenge the property of the rich, but that everyone would want. That's what a serious revolutionary party does. None of the communist groups in America do that. They have a minimum and maximum program. And the minimum program is just what the Democrats are doing. And the maximum program is, and sometimes they don't even explain what it is. Like, it's stuff that is so beyond our imagination. Sometimes it's just phrases thrown together. We will fight for the people, and we will eradicate the suffering of the downtrodden. And, it's like stuff that doesn't even have any real practical meaning. It's just podium pounding, right? And that is one sign of a fraudulent organization, is they're not putting forward a transitional program. We have a transitional program. Our 4 points are 4 things: public control of banking, public control of natural resources, a mass program to hire the unemployed to rebuild America, a mass reconstruction program to rebuild the country's infrastructure, and an economic bill of rights to invest in our population. Those are four things that are very, very, people can see that. They say, oh, okay, so instead of having private banks, we'd have a national bank that would lend money based on what would make the country stronger. They can see that, right? Countries have national banks. Okay, natural resources. Instead of big corporations owning our oil and gas and coal and timber, the government would own them, and the money from it would go into the public budget, and we wouldn't have to pay taxes because we'd get rich off our own natural resources. Okay, we can see that, right? Having the state hire all kinds of people to go rebuild the country, kind of like Roosevelt did. Pave the roads, build high-speed railway, build new colleges and universities. That happens all the time, right? We can see that. And then from there, using the money that's generated from the national bank and from the public natural resources and all that to start investing, providing education, providing healthcare like they do in many countries. Yeah, that's 4 things that if we were to change them, the United States would have a pro-growth economy, right? The economy would grow, and it's our 4-point plan is very, very believable and understandable to most people, but it would break the power of the big bankers and break the power of the oil monopolies, and that's why it's a good plan. That's why it's a revolutionary vision. It's a transitional program. Maybe PSL is lacking proper vision of practically applicable socialism within themselves, or haven't studied real-world examples of socialism in practice. Well, this is interesting, right? What it really is that PSL, the reason that they support governments around the world like Iran, like North Korea, like China, is they feel sorry for them. They don't take inspiration from them. They come out of the Trotskyite tradition. They hate Stalin. They hate Mao. And they think all these communist governments have been so weakened because they're under threat from imperialism and they're distorted. And they kind of like feel sorry for all these countries. It's like these countries are all just big victims, right? It's like this weird identity politics. Whereas with me, I look at what the Soviet Union achieved, industrializing very rapidly with 5-year economic plans, defeating the Nazis. I look at the Soviet Union with admiration. They don't. we both, if you press us, would say that the fall of the Soviet Union was a bad thing. The Soviet Union had great achievements, but they feel sorry for the Soviet Union. They feel guilty. They feel sorry. They feel like America is just such an evil place and it was mean to the Soviet Union. Yeah, they feel sorry for these countries, whereas I look to these countries with great admiration. That is one really big difference between me and the Marcyites. And that's one thing. It wasn't even really apparent to me when I was a Marcyite. It's been taken years. And really, this is more true of PSL than the other Marcyite formations. But PSL in particular, all of their members, I mean, listening to them talk is like listening to one of the squads, money for jobs and not for war. America's racist. Trump is like a racist, fascist. Oh my God. Like they're just like the most cringe woke people that you've ever heard. And yeah, they feel sorry for countries. That's why they support Iran, is they feel sorry for Iran. That's why they support China. They feel sorry for China. It's not admiration. They don't want to be like them. And the policies that they advocate are the opposite. The thing that drove me up the wall is they want to dismantle the power grid of the United States. They say in their platform, immediately replace all fossil fuel power in the United States. All fossil fuel power in the United States, immediately replace it with sustainable energy. And they oppose nuclear power. So if you in this right now, you got all the oil power, all the coal power plants in America, all the oil power, all the coal power, and all the nuclear plants, and you replaced them with windmills and solar panels, we would have maybe 20% of the electrification in America. That would be genocide. That's a genocidal policy, right? If you went to a country in the developing world and reduced their their rate of electrification by 80%, that would be a genocidal policy, right? I mean, the fact that they even advocate, it's like they don't even think about it. Fossil fuels are like bad. Fossil fuels are racist. Oh my God. It's like they don't even think about what they're saying. Like that's not that just drives me up the wall. I saw that in their platform. Immediately replace all fossil fuel-based energy in America with sustainable energy, and they oppose nuclear power. And it's like, do you know what that means? I want to build nuclear plants all over America. I want to build all kinds of exciting new power plants. I want America leading fusion energy research. I don't know what the hell. Stalin didn't get rid of power plants. Stalin built the largest power plants in the world. And it's like anyone who has studied the history of any communist government in the world knows they don't degrow. When I saw that, that's just, but it's written by one of these, nose ringed, like leftists, like angsty leftists. Oh my God. Like power plants are like racist. They're like scary man power plants, and it's just, ugh, ugh, ugh. I don't know what to say. And it's like, it's like, we don't, I don't know. There's just something, I don't know. I've probably offended a whole bunch of people there. I shouldn't be this mean, but it grinds my gears, so to speak. It grinds my gears. I get annoyed, right? That, I've spent my life studying this ideology, studying communist countries and all that. And, what do I know, right? Red Axis says, what do you think of Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson and their brand of populism? Is it performative or real? Are they white supremacists? I don't think they're white supremacists. Tucker Carlson, I really like. Tucker Carlson has really come a long way. I will say that. He was really particularly nasty to Cynthia McKinney at one point. He was just a regular Republican at one point. But he supported the Uhuru 3. He interviewed Putin. He's great in a lot of ways. He's interviewed Dan Kovalik, a great friend of ours, who's an anti-imperialist activist. Tucker Carlson has really pivoted in a very good direction. Steve Bannon, Steve Bannon is, I don't know, he's anti-establishment in his own way. And he is good at like crafting Trump's policies to be kind of anti-elite. I don't have very much confidence in Steve Bannon. I'll be honest. Steve Bannon seems really fixated on hating China. Tucker Carlson can be pretty anti-China at times too. So, I'm not a huge I'm not going to applaud for both of them, but I love Tucker in a lot of ways that I don't love Steve Bannon. But both of them do represent a better side of Trumpism. I'll give you that. Both of them represent a better side of Trumpism. One thing I just got to throw out there, right? I mean, Tucker Carlson at Charlie Kirk's funeral. This clip going around, everyone says, oh my God. I watched the clip. He said, you don't silence people's ideas by killing them. That's the point he's making. And he talks about the crucifixion of Jesus. And he just says, Jesus was preaching, and there were some people who got together and they said, I know, we'll kill him. That'll silence him. And look, it didn't work. Now everyone, Christianity's been around for that. That's all he said. He did not say the Jews killed Jesus. He did not say the Jews killed Charlie Kirk. He didn't say the Jews did anything. He said at the time Jesus existed, there were people who didn't like him, and they thought killing him would silence him. I listened to what he said. There were like conspiracy-minded people that are like, oh my God, he said it. And it's like, no, he didn't. And there were all these people calling him a Nazi and saying, oh my God, he said it. He didn't say any of that. And this is the problem with our clickbait culture. All Tucker Carlson made a completely benign, normal point, which is that when you murder somebody who's going around saying unpopular things, it leads more people to listen to them. That's all he was saying. He said nothing about Jews, right? He said nothing about Jews at all. Like, whether if you want him to be saying it or don't want him to be saying it, he didn't say that. And I saw that clip going around, and I saw people so happy that he said it. I saw people so mad that he said it. He didn't say either of those things. Right? I mean, he just made a point that, he said the classic Jesus story. It was not, I don't know. And it's funny because there are places in the Bible it does say the Jews, right? I think the Gospel of John and other places. Tucker didn't quote one of those places. Like, I don't know why people were reading into Tucker Carlson's speech like that. But that's, again, part of the social media clickbait culture, right? Is that it's like you get points for reading into things. And it's like you always want to make something scandalous. You always want to make something clickbait. If you don't offend people, if you don't make people really angry, if you don't, again, you don't get points for being rational and sensible. You get points for reinforcing and amplifying the crazy emotions people already have, which is not helpful. Not helpful. Not helpful. Not helpful. Well, look, folks, the folks at Do Dissidents, I am excited. I'm going to be going on Do Dissidents soon. That's going to be a great opportunity. And they want to talk to me about the years of lead. Good for them. It's great. I'm looking forward to it. Penny says, thousands of bikers in Burkina Faso visited the king for a blessing. Bike gangs and the Brotherhood. Check signal for photo. Well, who's the king? Like the king, I know, is it like a tribal king? Because I know that there are like tribal groups in some African countries that have some kind of hereditary monarchy, but I don't believe they have a monarch of the country, right? The king, who is the king? Like, I don't understand Burkina Faso's politics enough to really understand that. But anything out of Burkina Faso, Penny, that's one awesome thing about you is you follow the news of Burkina Faso, Mexico, and other countries very closely. Burkina Faso, again, Penny wrote a book, Africa's Flame, The Rise of Ibrahim Traore. Go check out this book. It's great. You will learn about a great African leader. We've been having rallies around the country to promote the great African leader, Ibrahim Traore. So it's Elvis. I have a feeling it's not Elvis. There's not a lot of love for Elvis on the African continent. Though maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's people on the African continent who love Elvis. But my understanding is the black community in America never particularly loved Elvis because the reason Elvis became famous is he was a white man who could sing black music when black people weren't allowed. And there's not a lot of love for Elvis among black Americans. I don't know how they feel about Elvis on the African continent. Actually, I take back what I said. Maybe he's wildly popular. I know. I get the joke, Ryan. Yes. I was laughing. I get the joke. I get the humor. Ryan. I get it. I got it. But anyway, all right. Well, listen, folks. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for asking good questions. Thanks for getting me talking. Today, I don't know, man. I was the allergies and I was sneezing a lot and itching a lot. And, it was, I thought, I definitely need to stream tonight. That's what I thought. I definitely need to do a stream tonight. And it will be, I was just with the allergies. I thought, it'll cheer me up to talk to people. I was right. I was absolutely right. It was the right thing to do. Nobody makes me happier than all of you. I'm serious. Nobody makes me happier than all of you. All of you, you made my night. I had a great time engaging with all of you tonight. It was really, really awesome. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for being here night after night after night to talk about politics and world events and Elvis and all kinds of stuff. Thanks for being here. Dare to struggle, dare to win. You guys are great. You really are. You really are great. And that's one of the great things about modern technology. I can get on here every night and talk about stuff. Mark your calendars for October 4th, Day of Action. Mark your calendars. That's next Saturday. Mark your calendars, especially January 11th. We're going to have a CPI reception in New Jersey. Very, very exciting. Yeah, we're doing great stuff. We are doing great stuff here. So join the Center for Political Innovation. Get involved in our activities. Hold on. Yeah, we're doing great stuff. And, we just have to keep going. And some days are easier than others. And sometimes things seem particularly bleak. Our political situation is not great right now. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm really disappointed in a lot of ways. And I know a lot of you are as well, right? But this Comey thing gives me some hope. It's a great sign that Comey got prosecuted. I don't want to wish ill will on anybody, but, the fact that they're moving against the Russiagators, that is a good thing. It's a very, very, very good thing that they are moving against the Russiagators. So, salute to Tulsi Gabbard. Salute to the BRICS economy that's rising around the world. Dare to struggle, dare to win, folks. We're on the right side, and we got to solidify our own ranks. We got to build an organization that can withstand. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All right, everybody. Talk to you soon. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.